This is Canada Talks Archery, and I'm your host, Kelly Taylor. Welcome to the wide, wild world of flinging arrows. Canada Talks Archery is proud to be sponsored by PSE Archery. Check out their latest bows, the Super X and the Evolve, at psearchery.com. And today we're joined by Canadian archer extraordinaire Chris Perkins. Chris, welcome to Canada Talks Archery.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
So we set this up when we were in Yankton at the Rushmore Rumble. And then in the interim, you went and did something crazy. You actually won Iowa. Congratulations.
I did, yes. Thank you.
How did that go?
Good. I mean, I've won that event 4 times now, which is the most wins I've had at a single event. I really like the format there. We shoot 2 different styles, both Saturday, Sunday. Or you have an option to shoot Friday. I chose to shoot the Friday evening line just with the circumstances of the weather. A lot of people had to cancel the Friday evening line and then could possibly make it at a later line on Saturday. So I was willing to give up my spot because I arrived the day early, shot Friday evening, which is a indoor nationals 5-spot round, the blue and white face. And then basically day off Saturday and did a little bit of practicing, make sure everything was good for the Vegas round. And the Vegas round was Sunday. And they do things a little differently there, kind of the same as the Lancaster Classic. They score X's as 11. So people that are not really familiar with the whole 690 score or what that actually means is the 5-spot round there again scored a little differently. X's are 6s there. And then, the X round on the Vegas round is scored 11. So that's where you get the 690 total.
For those who are unaware, I mean, you won it outright.
I did win it outright, yeah.
Yeah, tell us what that means, because, for a lot of people, they're going, hey, look, back in my day, you won or you didn't win. What's this win outright stuff?
Yeah, so win outright. Obviously, I shot a perfect 690 to 690, which I believe they had said had only been done one other time. I'm not 100% sure on that. I can't really confirm. But that tournament has been running for 30 years. And like I said, they said, 690 has only been done possibly one other time. But yeah, winning an event outright is something that is not really done all too often now. The level of competition is just far exceeded what I think anybody could ever think it could be at.
Right.
Obviously people that are familiar with Vegas and indoor nationals, I mean, those rounds, there's been, I don't know, like 20 plus people shoot clean on a weekend. So then you have your shoot off, basically sudden death situations. And yeah, I was fortunate enough to be able to win Iowa outright with I believe it was a 2-point buffer. So yeah, it's certainly awesome. It's humbling at the same time to be able to shoot a perfect score and not miss an X. So
yeah. I know the week prior in Yankton, there were 19 people that shot clean.
Yep.
And went to the shoot off. That must ramp up the pressure a little bit, doesn't it? When you're, one of 19 people standing and it goes down to X only scoring.
Yeah, I mean it's I guess on a slightly smaller scale than Vegas. Basically same thing. You shoot a 900, you go into your final basically sudden death shoot off. But yeah, being one of the 19 there to shoot a perfect score and shoot a pretty decent X count, I think 88 X's out of 90. Yeah, it certainly boosts the confidence a little bit going into the shoot off. But yeah, it's changing from regular scoring to X's has definitely added some pressure. Yeah.
Yeah. How important is confidence when you're in that situation? And I say that because, I get to the line in a tournament like Vegas or Rushmore Rumble, and I'm not shooting for anything. I'm just there to have fun. And even at that, I feel sort of the tension here in the sternum, right? And you feel the nerves and your hands get a little shaky. But I'm wondering, when you get to a point where you're, almost completely confident in your shot, does that kind of pressure go away, or do you just have to find a way to shoot through it.
I wouldn't really. I mean, it's more so nerves, I think, than pressure. I mean, obviously, yeah, there's a certain expectation you try to uphold yourself. Obviously, putting yourself in that situation time and time again certainly helps with the experience there, what works, what doesn't work. For me, it's not so much pressure. I guess as an expectation standpoint, it's more or less just being able to handle the nerves, what I know works and what I know doesn't work. But yeah, having confidence in your shot, knowing that what's going to happen with that shot certainly plays a big factor in confidence. Obviously, second guessing yourself, that's not necessarily going to be the best case scenario when it comes down to high intensity or high pressure situations. I try and shoot to hit, not try and shoot to miss. So I guess that's a little bit different for myself when it comes to somebody that has the experience in that situation.
Yeah.
It's confidence, I think, is everything when it comes to being able to perform under pressure and in high pressure situations such as Vegas or essentially any shoot off, I guess.
Yeah, I was coaching one of our young archers. Shout out to Siler Anderson Johnson last night because he's going to Vegas for the first time.
Yep.
And I encourage our young archers to try and get to as many of the bigger shoots as they can.
Mm-hmm.
Even if they're just entering flights or the non-competitive rounds, because it seems to me, and maybe you've got some thoughts to share on this. It seems to me the only way to learn how to shoot in a tournament is by shooting in a tournament.
Yeah, I mean, even as a pro, we all talk about, we can shoot 330 X's all day long at, whether it be your home range, a local tournament, without having that pressure out of your comfort zone, nothing really changes. Like you don't really like, I wouldn't say you don't really advance as a shooter, but there's nothing to change your perspective on things. Like Vegas, like, well, I guess any professional sport, nobody ever become pro by, sitting back and just being content with where they're at, getting to that next level, you're going to have to put yourself in that situation. You're going to have to maybe not start from the bottom, but you're going to have to start from the middle of the pack and climb your way to the top. It's not, nobody come into this sport with, the given pro status or a given big name like Rio Wild, Jesse Broadwater, like those guys. Like nobody got a name like that with just being content and kind of sitting back and not entering those tournaments.
I know for a lot of archers, when they get to those tournaments, again, it's the nerves. And I'm wondering if you've got any specific strategies for getting your head in the right space.
I mean, I don't really treat it as any different than, practicing at home. I mean, it's 20 yards. It's the same target. It's no different. The only thing that changes is the atmosphere in the venue. To walk into a tournament such as Vegas and treat it differently than you would treat it shooting around at home, I mean, essentially you're already taking a step back. It's not any different, so there's no reason to treat it any differently. For me, when it comes down to nerves or being able to control the nerves in that, it was just more or less experience, putting myself in the high pressure situations, putting myself outside of my comfort zone. I don't really think there's any other way to deal with that than, putting yourself in a situation that you're not comfortable with.
Right. I remember watching the video the year that Austin was in the shoot-off for the Young Adult Championship.
Yep.
And I think it was Rio Wild was on the mic, and he was saying, the tendency of some archers when they're in this situation is they they try that little bit harder. They focus a little bit harder on that spot. They try to aim just a little bit more, and it doesn't usually work out because
Right.
you just have to kind of trust your shot and continue with your shot process, regardless of the situation you're in.
Right. And most people, when they get into a high pressure situation, such as a shoot off, shoot not to miss. So, I mean, they completely change their game plan. Instead of shooting to hit it, now they have in the back of their mind, well, geez, I can't miss it, you know? So that's, like I said, that's where experience comes down to really, I guess, give you that little bit more of an edge in those shoot offs, is knowing how to handle it and knowing that, okay, well, yeah, there's going to be probably a little bit more movement in the pin. I'm probably going to feel slightly different, but everything else, when it boils down to base fundamentals, it's all the same.
Right, right. So are you a command shooter or are you a
Nope.
surprise shooter?
Nope. I'm not a command shooter at all. It works when it works. And when it doesn't, it doesn't work. For me, I wouldn't really say I'm a surprise shooter. I have a rough idea when it's going to break, but by no means am I forcing it to go off.
You know, a lot of people when they're beginning archery, they're told, okay, here's the bow, right? These are the little
Yep.
no glove releases, right? Put the pin on the X, and when it's there, let it go,
Yep.
right? And then that becomes a bad habit that now becomes really hard to break when you're trying to get better.
Yep.
Um, and I can imagine that without the experience, being able to trust the float when you're at full draw and it's kind of, doing its little thing
Mm-hmm.
on the X and being able to just execute the shot so that it returns to the X as it goes off, that proprioception or whatever it is that
Yep.
the Turner calls it,
Mm-hmm.
is one of the most difficult things to master.
Yeah, I wouldn't really say it boils down to timing, because that basically, I would say, takes a page out of a command shooter
Right.
book. For me, I've always shot a hinge, even in super windy conditions. I've always worked through a back tension. I mean, I've probably shot a button, I don't know, maybe for 100 arrows in a competition ever. Um, just if it got to a point where, maybe been a team event or something, we were timed, the shot had to break, stuff like that had to go relatively quickly. But for the most part, I would say about 99% of my archery career has been with a hinge. Um, and for me, yeah, I mean, kind of touching back on when you had said something about a command shooter, or a surprise shot. For me, like I said, I think in the back of my mind, I have a subconscious timing as to when I know it's going to break, so that, if I do have, some crazy pin float and a shoot off situation or whatever, it's not going to break out in the 9, or it's not going to break out in the 8. But also, I would say the experience takes over too. And like you said, kind of the pin, going back and forth, and as it's kind of returning, and I wouldn't really say kind of driving by, but as it's returning, the shot will break. I think that's just probably experience from all these years. But
Yeah, yeah. Because honestly, the one thing that I struggle with is I did a camp with Penny and Lee Heddletwit over
okay.
Christmas.
Mm-hmm.
And she's a level 3 instructor for mental management systems.
Yep.
They do form camps, in a number of different spots.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that they did is they advised me to add a half an inch to my draw length.
Okay.
And I just a few days earlier had Austin add a half an inch to my draw length. So now I'm at an inch more draw length than I was, 2 weeks ago. And
Yep.
and it was a bit of a struggle to get used to it. But now um, I can really sort of feel myself stacking the bones, as it were, between the
Mm-hmm.
inside the bow.
Yep.
And when I get it right and, sort of rotate the scapular until the hinge goes off, it generally lands in the X.
Hmm.
Um, the problem is when it's not going off quite when you think it should,
Yeah.
and then your third finger comes into play, right?
Yeah.
Uh, Trying to get over that hump is a bit of a hurdle for me. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, draw length is a pretty significant change, and especially, you're talking, an inch. When I talk about draw length changes, I'm talking sixteenths or 30 seconds. Um, adding an inch to your draw length, it's going to take some time for sure. But as you said, being able to work through the hinge and being able to work through that shot a lot better and a lot easier certainly helps when it comes to obviously posting good scores. But like you had said too, there's also that shot window that you kind of want to stay in. And when you get outside of that shot window, a lot of the form and a lot of your process starts to break down pretty rapidly. Um, Generally, I always recommend, for somebody to draw down, start over, just kind of mentally reset. It's not so much that you're coming out of the shot. It's just, there's no point in giving away points to try and be a superhero when you still have X amount of time left on the clock, that you have enough time to regroup, reset, um, and to essentially give yourself that confidence boost that, okay, yeah, we can make everything right again, everything feels good. And like you said, especially making a big change like that, you're having to essentially work that confidence back up and what feels right and what doesn't feel right.
Right, right. So since we're talking about a hinge, let's give you an opportunity to make a plug here. Like last year, you worked with TruBall Excel and you came out with the signature Chris Perkins Executive Hinge,
I
um,
did, yeah.
which features a unique feature in that you can adjust basically the length of the neck.
Correct, yeah.
Yeah. How did that come about?
So for me, I've always hated retying D loops. Draw length is very, very critical for me. I play quite a bit with cables and strings to get it feeling how I want. Once I get the bow kind of where I want, then I'll go ahead and I'll play with D loop lengths. The release idea come to me when basically, I go to retie a D loop after X amount of thousand shots out of it, or, start to fray. I feel like it's time for a new one. And it didn't really matter what I did. I could never really get it where it was before. I mean, I've measured them. I've used a caliper to measure them. I get them close, and just something always feels just a little different. Or, you're practicing at home. It's a new bow. You go to your first tournament of the year and you're like, that doesn't feel right. It feels shorter. It feels long. Being able to adjust it in the release itself gives you that versatility to make a fast adjustment, and make it to the point where you don't have to touch setup. You won't have to touch, your bare shaft or anything like that. You won't have to touch anything within the system. So you're able to do it right in the handle, right in the release itself.
Right. So how important is it being able to do that as opposed to twists in the cables?
Yeah. So I mean, every time you do anything to the bow, whether it be twist cables, add weight on, your front or rear stab, it's going to change the tune. It's going to change what you've done through paper, or it's going to change what you've done with the bare shaft at, whatever distances you do that at. But every time you make a minute change to the system itself, um, it essentially could make it critical. I mean, it could make it better. Who knows? But obviously, in a tournament situation or in the middle of a tournament, you're not going to want to make those big changes. So, being able to, like I said, change something outside of the system itself makes it easier. Essentially, less stress on myself or anybody that's using it. And I mean, a screw, a half a turn here or there can make a world of difference, and yeah, can certainly clean up your score, or even make things feel better.
Right. So that kind of touches on the next thing I was going to ask, and that is um, when your shots aren't quite landing right in a tournament and you need to get through that round, it really is important to just, I mean, you're not going to go over to a bow press and start, fiddling with your strings, or your cables, or anything like that. But it's important to do whatever it takes to get as many middles as you can, right? Like if you're having a
Yeah.
form issue and it's causing you to go low left, well, move your sight low and left,
Hmm.
right? Just do whatever it takes at that time to get through that round, and then fix the form issue, after the tournament when you're back in practice, right?
Yeah. I mean, like I've shot several rounds where, I feel like it's good, but then, middle through the round, midways through the round, I feel like, something is, critical, whether it be me or whether it be the bow. I've done all sorts of changes to a bow in the middle of a tournament to get it to where I need it to be. Um, we're all human. We change it. We change on a daily. So what works today may not work tomorrow. You just try and find something that is going to, I guess, produce time and time again throughout the year. You know, being able to, I guess, have that adjustability within the release to do a change um, is awesome. But if you need to make a bigger change, I mean, you can go to a bow press, you can do the cables, you can do the string. There's lots of us that have done it. I mean, like you said, in order to obtain a high X count, we may have to change things 4 or 5 times until we get it right. And like I said, everybody's human and we all change on a daily. So
Yeah, yeah. One of the most impressive bits of coaching I ever saw was last year in Limerick at the World Archery Youth Championships. Because
okay.
my wife and I went there because we're hosting the next one in
Okay,
Winnipeg.
yep. Yep.
So I was sitting behind, and for no particular reason, this is where I was sitting. I was behind the Moldovan archers,
Okay.
and it was a recurve, and something happened. I think there were like a few strands broke on this one archer's string.
Hmm.
So the Moldovan coach grabbed the bow and during scoring was able to, clamp it in her legs, get the string off, put a new string on, and probably about 4 or 5 times undo the string, twist it, put it back on until the brace height was right. And
Hmm.
she was able to give the bow back to the archer in time for the next round. I thought that
Amazing.
was pretty impressive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Huh.
So, um, when you're getting a new bow ready, because you just switched from the TRX, was it a 38 or
Yeah,
36?
38, 40. I shot
3840.
both of them
Yeah, so
quite a
from the
bit.
TRX to the title, the new one,
Yeah.
the Matthews title.
Hmm.
Um, what's your process for getting a bow ready?
Uh, it can be a long process. It can be a short process. For me, like I said, draw length is pretty critical for how I want things to feel. So I'll work with that first. Once I get the bow feeling as far as draw length where I need it to be, I'll then work from the draw length. I'll go to the stabilizers. Once I get the stabilizers where I need them to be, then I'll go work on an arrow setup or multiple arrow setups. Just basically doing a lot of testing, trying to figure out what it likes, what it doesn't like. But for me, I think probably the most time spent on one aspect would probably be stabilizers. I can get my draw length where it needs to be and where I feel comfortable and where I want it to be pretty quick. I kind of been right around 29 and 3/16 to 29 and a quarter for the last couple of years. So depending on axle to axle length, that may change a little bit just because of string angle. But I think what I spend a lot of time on is stabilizers, getting the pin float or even trying to get it to stop kind of how I want throughout my whole shot process.
Right, right. Um, how close to the formula for stabilizers do you get? Like they say, equal torque at the front as at the back.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really follow a formula. I just kind of add weight, take weight off, change angles. Like I said, until I get the pin movement how I want. To be honest, I don't even know what's on my title right now. I'm probably pretty equal front and back. Actually, this year I'm running my rear bar quite a bit lower angle wise than what I would normally run. Generally, it's pretty level, maybe, 20 to 25 degrees on a down angle. This year, it's quite a bit down, probably closer to 45. And I just found with the title, it just seemed to be where it likes to be and where it gave the best bow reaction upon fire for me. But if I had to guess, there's probably 23 ounces on the front and probably 19, 20 on the back.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's pretty telling that you've experimented so much you don't even really know what's on it.
Yeah, I mean, and there again, like I said, kind of touching back on saying that we change on a day to day. I mean, what I shot in Rushmore to what I shot in Iowa might have been an ounce, maybe an ounce and a half difference, just enough that there was a small enough change there that I could see the difference in pin movement. But I don't like, I mean, I don't take off and add on a ton of weight at one time. I'll spend, I might spend a better part of a week on one particular setup. You know, a lot of people, they just add weight here and there all the time, whether it be one arrow or two arrows in, and that doesn't really give you enough time to really see if it's going to make a big difference. And when I say I change angles on the rear stab or the front stab, I'll change it maybe a degree or two at a time until, I might see a change. I may not see a change. I may have to go quite a ways before I actually see some improvement versus over, it might not improve at all. But for me, it's a little weight at a time, spend some time with that and see if it actually is going to give me what I want. And then, essentially go from there.
Right, right. How often do you make a change and go, oh, that wasn't good?
Um, when I'm trying to figure a bow out, I may add, like I said, I may go big, add an ounce or two, maybe even 3 ounces at a time. And if I don't see an instant change with that, I may add another ounce or two on it until I see a big drastic change in it. Or like you said, it may not work at all. I may work backwards, or I may change the angle of it. But I also pay attention to mass weight too. When you start shooting 60 arrow rounds for score that take 2.5, 3 hours, it takes a lot out of you, especially if you have a bow that's too heavy. That essentially can hurt you during your round. So obviously, I try and balance both having enough weight and to basically stabilize the system, and then also not having too much weight to where I fatigue myself.
Right, right. Which brings me to another question, and that is, sometimes you'll hear an archer, a relatively new archer, looking at the amount of weight that Mike Schlusser or Austin or Chris Schaff have on their bows and go, oh, that's
Yep.
what I need. And that's a mistake, isn't it?
Yeah, there's a lot of things that can hurt a new archer. Stabilizer weight obviously being one of them. Even for myself, 23 ounces on a front bar, it's pretty substantial. Like that's quite a bit of weight. I think up until, gosh, I have to really think about this now. Uh, Up until probably 2011. 2011, I think when I won the world championships, I was running 12 and 12. And at that time was a lot of weight. But I think probably 2010 and before, I may have had a total of 5 ounces, maybe 6 ounces total on the bow.
Yeah.
And even if you look back, you go back 15 years, it was all the same. Everybody had the same thing,
Yeah.
everybody didn't have a lot of weight. The stabilizers were super spongy, like that. The whole feel of a lot of weight and a stiff stabilizer has really come on in the last 10 years. And like you said, somebody that's coming up into the sport, seeing that on a lot of the pros, stabilizers or their bows or anything like that, they automatically assume that I need a lot of weight on there in order for, me to shoot a good score, essentially.
Right. Because I mean, the thing about having a lot of weight, especially when it's 30 inches out the front and 12 or 15 inches out the back,
Yep.
is that if you're not super proficient in your target acquisition, that ends up being a lot of weight you have to move to get your pin to
Yep.
the middle, isn't it?
Yep. And the same as
And
if you're shooting like 50-meter feet of stuff. Like everybody's like, oh, you got to add the weight for the wind. Well, that can be okay and that can be bad at the same time, because I mean, once that system starts moving, it's going to take a lot to get that system to stop moving.
right, right. It's inertia again.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
it's like I said, for me, it's a balance. I try and find something that, I can shoot 300 arrows or 400 arrows a day and not feel fatigued by just trying to hold the bow up.
right, right. Um, so how steady is your dot when you're once you've
I
acquired the
float. I
target?
float inside of Vegas 10.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right. That's good for a lot of people that are worried. Oh, it's not stopping. Right.
I can sometimes get it to stop, but I would say probably about 99% of the time, it's moving. Obviously, you want that movement to be subtle. Like for me, I don't want it to be like super erratic. I want it to be slow, but I want it to be fast enough that it returns to the middle, if that makes
Right.
any sense.
Right. And that also factors into stabilizer weights too, because
Yep.
it makes it that much harder for it to naturally move back into the center as well.
Yep. Yeah. And I'm in stabilizer weight, stabilizer lengths. The longer it's out there, the if you're running a down degree or if you're running it straight out of the bow, basically all you're doing is you're changing leverages. Same with angles on the rear stab. You're changing a leverage. Basically, you're wanting it to cant the bow back to the center of the bubble, obviously. But also with it doing that, you're also adding torque to the system too.
Right.
So yeah, it's a big. It when it comes to stabilizer, it's a big balance game essentially.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's talk about one of the biggest moments in your career. And it's something that you didn't know happened until about 9 months later.
Yeah,
And that
yeah,
was winning Vegas, right?
yep.
So talk about that. How did that come about? Like, I mean, obviously you lost the last round to Bobby Eiler, and um, then drug testing came back, and all of a sudden you're on the top.
Yeah, it's certainly a weird deal. Obviously, we've never had anything like that happen in previous Vegases, or even I guess previous archery tournaments in general. Yeah, I mean it's. I guess it was probably yeah. I guess it was probably October, maybe 9, 10 months somewhere in there, like you said.
Yeah.
Until I received the phone call from NFAA Bruce, and yeah, basically congratulating me on winning Vegas back in 2018, I guess it was now. So seems like
So
yesterday, but it's also quite a while ago.
yeah, yeah. So what was your reaction?
What was I doing? I was changing the oil on the tractor, and I got a phone call that come up on my phone is from Yankton, South Dakota, and I don't know too many people from Yankton, South Dakota, so I kind of had a rough idea on who it was. And then yeah, like I said, Bruce was on the other end of the line, and like I said, basically congratulating me. And it was more like just like a holy crap moment, I think,
Yeah.
more than anything. Um, but also kind of a disappointment at the same time. Um, and what I mean by that is just not really having that glory moment um, on the
Standing
shoot
at the
off
top of the
floor.
podium and yeah.
Yeah, like there was a bunch of things that's obviously being stripped from when it comes to having that moment of a Vegas champion. So, and I think a lot of people's reaction too was, well, you got the money. Well, for me, like I'm not in the sport for the money. I love doing what I'm doing. But that was to me like, I mean, money is a disposable thing. But to go back on a memory such as that and how big that tournament is, I just never did. I never did get that moment.
Right.
I mean, fingers crossed that eventually someday I do, but
Yeah.
just at that time, yeah, I think for me it was a bit of a disappointment at the same time.
Well, and um, not to completely rain on Bobby Eiler's parade. I think he got some bad advice. I think he could have had a therapeutic use exemption for the polypropanol, but I don't think, or propropanol, I guess it's called. I don't know. Those drug names are so hard to pronounce.
Yeah.
The beta blocker.
Right. Yes.
He was advised not to even apply for a TUE on the beta blocker, which may have helped, but I don't think it would have helped him on the THC.
Right.
So
Yeah. I mean, I don't really know the whole process on that. I mean, being a past world champion, being on Adams whereabouts program, stuff like that, where basically, I mean, they can test me at any time for X number of months. I guess I think for me, I think I was like 24 months, so like 2 years. I was on that, and yeah, I mean, they showed up. But as far as like the TUE therapeutic use exemption forms, like I don't really know the process. I've heard the processes on that, and from what I've heard, it's quite an ordeal. But yeah, I mean, I didn't really read through the entire court documents. Obviously, like I said, like you had said, it was in months of arbitration with that, with the NFAA and his lawyers and so on and so forth. So I don't really know the entire details,
right.
but yeah, I mean, could it have been avoided? I have no idea. But I think, like you said, just yeah, some bad advice, and it was just an unfortunate circumstance.
So like from our standpoint as outside observers, we didn't really know anything until we saw the press release come up from the NFAA.
Right.
Did you have any inkling something was happening until you heard from Bruce?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah. I returned home Monday from Vegas, and I was tested Tuesday. So, I mean, I had only shot one other event that year in France, the Nimes tournament, that was a testing event. And I kind of knew that they weren't going to come and test me a month later for an event that happened. And so, yeah, I mean, that right off the hop, that kind of, raised some suspicion as to what was going on. I mean, they didn't really give me any details. They just said it was ordered from World Archery, and that was it. I mean, they tested me, and I didn't hear a lick of anything until Bruce called me.
Right. Okay, cool. It's something that it's worth pointing out that it's taken very seriously in archery. And it was driven home a couple months back when we're lying in bed and all of a sudden the doorbell rings at 10 to 7 in the morning.
Yep.
And person says, "Hi, I'm from the Canadian Center for Ethics and Sports. Is Austin Taylor here?"
Yep.
And yeah, sure enough, he was, 10 minutes later, he was peeing
Yep.
into a cup.
Yep. Yeah. I've been tested here at home Well, actually, I was tested last year, uh, just before October, I think. And I've been tested at home probably 4 or 5 times now. I don't know how many times I've been tested overall at World Archery events, World Cups and stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, here at home, it's been at least almost a handful of times.
Yeah, yeah. So, anyone coming through the process, coming up through the system needs to know that it's something they watch very closely.
Yeah, and like what they test for, and the amounts that they test for is so minute that anything, cross contamination will show up. And I mean, it's something that, obviously we try and be super careful, where we eat and kind of keep track of stuff like that. And it's happened. It's happened, a few times. It's happened a couple of years ago where, a couple shooters were tested and it come back positive. And it is a stressful process, from what I've heard. Fortunate enough, I've never had any issues. I've never had anything come back. I take, a multivitamin daily. So like stuff like that, like, and especially a multivitamin, those companies, they have so much run through those facilities that, like I said, the amount or how small of an amount that they test for anything, any little cross contamination could result in a failed test.
Yeah, the opportunity for an inadvertent failed test is incredible.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
very high. If
yeah,
you
yeah,
you look at the data behind it, it's extremely sensitive, I guess you could say.
yeah, yeah. Okay, well, let's wrap it up here by giving you a chance to talk about probably your favorite subject, your new bow.
Yeah,
We mentioned earlier that you switched from the TRX to the title this year. How is
yeah.
that working out for you?
The title is a fantastic bow. It's a completely different system than we've seen from Matthews. Obviously, the TRX line has been around for quite a few years now, since at least 2017, maybe even earlier on. I joined the team back in 2018. I've had huge success with the TRX line, and I loved that system, loved that bow. And then having the opportunity to work with them, and seeing what they had in the works for this year, was something that we had never really seen before, from them. So completely new riser, obviously completely new limb system from them, and then obviously new cam. So I mean, they basically built this bow from ground up. And yeah, I mean, it's probably, and I'm not trying to give a biased opinion by any means, but it is probably one of the easiest and most forgiving bows that I've shot, to date. Um, System is super rigid, super stable, and it's something that, I think I'm going to get along with.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. So when we talked in Yankton, I'd asked you, are you do you prefer the aggressive cams? And you said you do. And I've
Yeah, for my
heard
shooting style, I prefer something that's going to pull on me a little bit more. So obviously a little bit less, percentage on holding weight. So I try and run anywhere between either a really low 70 or a high 60. Um, I'm probably, well, I'm shooting 60 and a half pounds right now. And I believe I'm holding right around 21 and a half, almost 22 pounds of holding weight.
right. And I've heard a few people say that the new title cams um are some of the more aggressive cams that are out there. Maybe a little bit more than the SVX or the M2s from PSE. Do you find that?
They're certainly racy. And what I mean by that is like they're snappy on the back end. I wouldn't necessarily compare them to an SVX or an M2. Both of those cams are pretty rigid right from the start. And that just means like when you say you're shooting 60 pounds on both of those cam systems, you're shooting 60 pounds. I find with the new cam on the title, um, it's pretty neutral kind of once you start. It stacks up quick, but it also just kind of plateaus out until you kind of get to the back end. So it's a super smooth cam. I wouldn't say it's super aggressive, but it definitely gives you that versatility when it comes to module choices to have basically what you want in the back wall. Like, do you want it to be super snappy, which is something I prefer? I'm running a 70% mod. Do you want to have a little bit of forgiveness in the back end? And they offer up to an 80% mod. But yeah, I mean, as far as comparing it to an M2 or an SBX, I wouldn't say it's that harsh, but it definitely is more aggressive than their CCT cam that's on their TRX line.
Right. And, for anyone who doesn't quite understand the terminology, when we say aggressive, that's where it really doesn't give you a lot of opportunity to leak from the back wall before it starts
Right.
feeding through, right?
Yeah, I mean, it essentially wants to go all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So do you find yourself a bone stacker, as Paige Pierce might call it? Do you like really get into the middle of the bow?
Yeah, I mean, when I come back to full draw and I hit that back wall, there's a couple videos online that you can probably see of me going through my shot process. If you watch my rear elbow, it actually will stack behind me, and basically what I'm doing is I'm preloading into the back end. So I guess you could call that bone stacking. Yeah.
Yeah. Because I wonder if people that are having problems with an aggressive cam, pulling them out of their back wall, if the issue is a form issue and that they're not getting into the right alignment, they're not sort of locking that elbow behind them, like you say.
Yeah, I mean, there's probably quite a bit to it versus, like you said, getting the elbow directly behind. I find a lot of people, whether it be shooting a button or shooting a hinge, I think more so with hinge shooters, they want that relaxed shot, and they don't feel that pressure change in the back end. And yeah, I mean, a more aggressive cam is going to want to, I'm not going to say it's going to want to rip your shoulder out, but it's going to certainly want to come off that back wall. And a lot of shooters, and especially new shooters, it's probably not the best system for them. Which, like I said, that's why Matthews gives you the option of running a higher percentage module, 80%. On their target bows, and all the way down to 70%. So you're going to find something in that, that is probably going to suit your desired, I guess, shooting form, essentially. Just for me, my shooting style, I like something super aggressive, keeps me way more positive on the back end, and I think I get away with a lot more.
All right, very good, Chris. Anything else you wanted to say?
I think we covered quite a bit of it.
We did, yeah. It's been a great podcast, and thanks very much for being on Canada Talks Archery. And we'll see you in Vegas.
All right. Thank you.